When it comes to restaurant food challenges, you might have asked yourself, what happens if you don't like the food that you're eating? Like from the very beginning. Well, in this food adventure, I'll be telling the not so fantastic tale of taking on one of the worst restaurant food challenges I've ever battled. And it takes place in Thessaloniki, Greece, at a restaurant called Fado Pesto. And on this day, fellow food fighter Randy Santel and I, we were both very excited to be kicking off a brand new food challenge in a 2v2 Team USA vs Team Greece eating competition event, going against Greek food fighters Damos and his partner Dimitri. So what exactly are we eating in this competition? Souvlaki perhaps? Or maybe even a giant gyro? I mean, it seems only fitting it should be some sort of well-known Greek food, right? Well, to be honest, it's not any kind of Greek food I'm aware of. And I really don't know what to call it because it was unlike anything I've ever seen before. And so let's just start with what exactly is in this thing. And first off, we have the bread, which by itself is quite a sight to see. What kind of bread is it? No idea. Just a heads up, you're gonna hear me say that a ton here. But it kind of reminded me of a giant French baguette with this very hard, crispy looking outside. And when I first saw it, I remember thinking to myself that you could probably break a window with it. Which is not exactly a desirable quality you want with your bread in a food challenge, especially when there's a ton of it. But don't worry, it only gets better from here, because on one side of the bread you have a tomato paste, and then on the other side you have like this sort of mustard spread, and the way that they were just slathering it on, the red flakes were already starting to pop up. But I'm trusting Randy to make sure it's all good, so I continued filming this beast as it was being created. Next came a ton of burger patties, with each half of this thing having something like 10 burger patties. Then the restaurant decided for whatever reason that there needed to be more tomato paste, then I guess some ketchup for good measure. Then after that they tossed in some spices. Which ones? No idea, just hoping it was salt and pepper at this case. Now, if you're starting to think to yourself, hey man, this doesn't seem too bad. Oh, don't you worry, we are just getting started. Because this is where things get really interesting. As the restaurant started taking what I'm thoroughly convinced was done at random, various sauces they had on hand. Which ones were used? You guessed it, no idea. But I do know that they were just laying down liberal amounts of it into this thing. And at this time, you could really start to get a sense that the restaurant didn't care about the food or the fact that we would actually be trying to finish this thing. It just seemed like they were having a jolly good old time, mixing and matching whatever they wanted, which also included bags of shredded coleslaw, and since there was clearly a lack of tomato-based product in this creation, they thought it was necessary to add some chunks of tomato in as well, then some shredded lettuce, then doused it all with some oils. Oh yeah, things are really starting to come together and shape up oh so nicely here. But let's not forget about my favorite part in all this, which is when they started adding fries by the handful, to add that much needed bulk for this otherwise tiny challenge.
What the hell?
And obviously you just can't leave that potato sitting there all bare and naked, you gotta dress it up with something. So it's topped with even more ketchup and mustard, and finally, a little more spice, which I'm sure was really necessary to bringing this masterpiece together. And as I continued to film, I was in a state of shock and awe at what was taking place, fearing the worst of just how disastrous this food adventure could end up being.
So, 1, 2, 3, boom.
Alright, here we go. Team USA vs Team Greece. Magic Mitch and Atlas versus Damos and Dimitri. So for this event, the challenge is for teams of 2 to finish their half of whatever you want to call this grotesque steaming pile of hot garbage. And if you're wondering, what do you do in those rare cases where the food is just terrible right from the start? There's only one real answer, and that is, well, tough luck. Yeah, it sucks, but in any case, there's really not a whole lot you can do. You're pretty much in a situation where you either have to put up or shut up, because it's game time. This is also why I don't have an issue with being more transparent about my adventures, and telling you about things like when the food is bad, though I do try my best to convey things in a much more comical manner, and not be too blunt about it. Because at the end of the day, it's all said and done, so why not just have a little fun with it? Anyways, back to the challenge at hand. Now if either team was able to complete their half of the challenge, they'd get their meal for free, which, again, no idea how much this was actually going to cost, but you'd also probably be rewarded with a lifetime of regret. Though I do want to point out there is a 1 sitting time limit, which is a huge advantage for most challenges, but really in this case, Just thinking about the fact that I could be facing off against this thing for over an hour, oh lordy, that just sounds absolutely horrendous. Especially since this challenge started at 10 p.m., which is absolutely nuts and definitely the latest I've ever done a food challenge. I actually think the only real advantage you have here is having a teammate, because while it is more enjoyable to share the table during the good times, it's also super helpful to have someone with you while you're in the trenches.
13 minutes and 15 seconds in, this is the last of our filling. This is the toughest part because there's like 9 or 10 sauces and they all don't mix well together. But I'm gonna get him down with the fries. He's working on the bread and then I'll be helping him with the bread, but still got plenty of time. Both of us are feeling good. We got Diet Coca-Colas to help us get all this bread down. We'll be all right.
And in this case, it doesn't get much better than the big man himself, Randy Santel, because you know he's gonna be giving it his all to get the job done, which meant I'd be very focused to not let him down. Though there were times throughout this challenge, we weren't exactly a cohesive unit, and tensions between us were a bit high at times. One example of this was a miscommunication we had where essentially he was asking me how I was doing and I responded with something like I'm slow playing it, which really meant I needed to pace myself out just to let the food settle, and Randy took that as I was intentionally slow balling it for some reason, so he started getting a little pissy. But I mean, saying I'm slow playing it was probably not the best phrasing, but to be fair, I was already getting flavor fatigue, was super tired, and I was sweating my bag off because it was super humid out. But regardless of any minor squabbles between the dream team, we both continued on as we had the same goal in mind, to take this thing down and get the win, no matter what it takes. Whether that be Randy taking more of the bread that I was struggling to chew through, or if I had to reassure Randy that I'd keep plowing forward just in case he needed to take a breather, or 2, or 3, whatever it need be, just to let the food settle for a bit before getting back into the arena. As for Team Greece, well, they were an unproven team with no track record, and considering Dimitri was on his phone during this heat-off, yes, that's actually something that literally happened during the challenge.
He's talking on the phone.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
So it's safe to assume that they don't have that much team cohesiveness, and the chances of them finishing their half were becoming bleaker as time went on. And eventually, even with such a commendable effort, Team Greece was on their last leg, and the odds of them finishing were very slim. So it was up to the dream team to continue on, and at this point, not only to get the win, but really, just not to have this whole experience result in a complete flustercluck for everyone involved. And so, we were digging deep, especially once that filling was finished and we moved on to the bread. And as I mentioned before, I was already getting full and had severe flavor fatigue. But once I got to the bread, I actually started performing a little bit of a magic trick on myself. I didn't want to trigger any sort of unfortunate event, which could easily be set off by tasting that mustard, tomato paste, or any of the bazillion flavors on this freaking thing. So I started scraping out the inside of the bread, then rolling it up like a little burrito and eating it that way. Then immediately chasing it with a Diet Coke. That way I'd mostly just taste the bread and the Coke, and not a whole lot of anything else. But despite these cheeky little strategies, once time had passed that 1 hour mark, that's when the real test began. Because I'd never battled a food monstrosity for this long. So up to this point, I would have either finished any challenge before the 1 hour time limit or not. But either way, win or lose, after the hour, it's over. But in this case, it was sort of like going into overtime, which is something I've never experienced in my eating adventures, and it was an odd obstacle of sorts to overcome mentally, all while I was getting fuller and experiencing more flavor fatigue. And even with Randy going off to the side, so he didn't have a unfortunate incident of his own, and it was right around the time where I was on my 6th can of Diet Coke, I could finally get a glimpse of seeing the finish line. And even so, it was not going to be easy getting there. So I continued, grinding away, piece by piece, even while at the absolute brink of my food fighting limits. Somehow, I was able to conjure up a little more magic from within. And even though I was right there, oh so close to the finish line, I wasn't quite there yet, because one false move, one little odd sensation, and all this effort could have been for nothing. So I took my time, making sure I was ready, body and mind, to take this thing down and claim the victory.
Well
done, Team USA.
1 hour, 21 minutes, and 26 seconds. That was so much freaking bread. It was really dense and covered with all that sauce.
Oh man. Every time I think about this day, I still can't believe how it all unfolded. from watching this monstrosity being constructed to actually having the ability to finish it all, or the fact that I felt so awful after I was physically unable to do my post-challenge push-ups. And if you have any questions or comments about this food adventure, put them down below so we can keep the conversation going. And if you enjoyed your time watching this food adventure, embark on another one, and I'll see you there.